They fought cargo ships?
The cargo ships that changed the galaxy. The message reached Earth's central diplomatic headquarters on a gray Wednesday morning. It arrived in 22 languages, each translation prepared with meticulous care by the Stellar Sovereignty Alliance's finest linguistic specialists. The content was brief and precise. Humanity's representatives were requested at the Alliance's capital world, Valoris Prime. The purpose stated was equally straightforward. A traditional ceremony of recognition meant to formally welcome humanity into the galactic community. Commander Elena Vasquez read the message 4 times before she truly understood what it meant. She had spent the better part of 8 months studying the Stellar Sovereignty Alliance. They controlled 912 star systems. They had preserved galactic order for nearly 7 centuries. They had never suffered a military defeat. Every civilization they had ever encountered had eventually submitted to their authority, most within a decade of first contact. The Alliance was not brutal by nature. They did not enslave species or obliterate worlds for sport, but they were absolute believers in what their philosophers called the doctrine of natural order. The strong guided, the weak followed. It was, in their worldview, simply how the cosmos functioned. Elena looked up from her desk to find Lieutenant Commander Rohan Mehta leaning against her doorframe, holding his own copy of the message. His expression told her he had already worked out what the ceremony would involve. "They're going to try to terrify us," Rohan said quietly. "Yes," Elena agreed, "quite spectacularly, I imagine." The intelligence briefings had been thorough. When a newly discovered species made contact with the Alliance, they were invited to Valoris Prime for what was officially called the Ceremony of Recognition. During this ceremony, the Alliance revealed what they called the Remembrance Fleet, thousands of warships captured from civilizations that had chosen war over submission. Species that had refused the Alliance's invitation and paid for that refusal with their independence, their technology, and in some cases, their existence. The display was designed to deliver a single unmistakable message. This is what defiance costs. According to every recorded account, no civilization had ever chosen to resist the Alliance after witnessing the Remembrance Fleet. The psychological impact was simply too overwhelming. Elena closed the briefing file and looked at Rohan. "Assemble the full diplomatic team, our best people." She paused, and Rohan pulled the complete historical shipping registry. Every vessel humanity has ever commissioned, retired, or lost. I want records going back to the first deep space colonial missions. Rohan raised an eyebrow. "May I ask why?" "Call it instinct," Elena said. "Probably nothing, but I like to be prepared." 3 weeks later, the diplomatic vessel Harmony dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Valoris system. Commander Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge, studying the view ahead. The capital world gleamed like a blue-green jewel, encircled by 37 orbital fortresses, each one roughly the size of a small moon. "Subtlety they are not," remarked Dr. Priya Nair, the team's cultural anthropologist, who had devoted years to studying the Alliance before this mission. "Subtlety isn't the objective," Elena replied. "Intimidation is." She had to admit, quietly, privately, that it was working, at least a little. Humanity's orbital defenses were formidable, but they were built around mobility and adaptability. These fortresses represented an entirely different philosophy. They announced, "We are so confident in our power that we display it openly, daring anyone to challenge it." "Give us another 800 years, Elena said, more to herself than to anyone else, "and we'll build things just as impressive." The communication console chimed. An alien face appeared on screen, scaled in deep violet with 4 amber eyes set in a symmetrical pattern. This was a Valorian, one of the Alliance's founding species. "Human vessel Harmony," the Valorian said. "You are cleared for docking at Ceremonial Platform 7. Follow the assigned guidance corridor. High Chancellor Draveth will receive you personally. The channel closed before Elena could respond. She glanced at her pilot. Follow the beacons. High Chancellor Draveth was waiting for them in the reception hall, nearly 3 meters tall, with those distinctive violet scales and amber eyes, wearing robes embedded with circuitry that shifted like liquid light. Commander Vasquez, Lieutenant Commander Mehta, Dr. Nair, humanity honors us with this visit, he said, his voice resonant and warm. Humanity has accomplished remarkable things in a remarkably short time. 340 colonized systems in just 4 centuries. Extraordinary. We're honored by your invitation, High Chancellor, Elena said. Humanity looks forward to building a lasting relationship with the Alliance. As do we, but first, understanding. Come, the other delegations are already gathering. The observation amphitheater was vast, built in a sweeping arc around an enormous transparent wall that looked out into open space. Thousands of aliens from dozens of species sat in arranged sections, each delegation separated by species. The atmosphere was the kind of silence that presses down on you, the silence of held breath and carefully contained fear. Elena, Rohan, and Dr. Nair were guided to a section marked with Earth's symbol. Around them, the assembled delegates sat rigid, staring at the transparent wall with expressions that ranged from anxiety to dread. This feels like standing before a tribunal, Rohan murmured. That's exactly what it is, Dr. Nair replied softly. They're not just showing us something, they're watching how we react. The amphitheater lights dimmed. A holographic projection bloomed above the stage, the image of a being unlike any Elena had ever seen, massive, ancient-looking, with skin like volcanic rock and 8 eyes arranged in 2 parallel rows. When the being spoke, the sound came from everywhere at once. Witness, the voice declared. Supreme Sovereign Keth Oron the 22nd, Master of the Alliance, Guardian of Order, Lord of 912 systems. Sovereign Keth Oron's image swept across the assembled delegates with those 8 eyes. You are here because your civilizations have joined the great galactic community. You are here to understand what the Alliance truly is, not conquerors, not tyrants, but architects of stability. We maintain peace because we understand power, and today, you will understand it too. He raised one enormous hand. Space outside the transparent wall began to ripple. Tears opened in the fabric of reality, small at first, then widening into great rifts through which ships began to emerge. Dozens, hundreds, thousands, an armada of ships that filled the void, a cemetery of other civilizations' pride. Dreadnoughts, siege platforms, battle cruisers, each one representing the military apex of a species that had chosen defiance and lost. Gasps spread through the amphitheater. Some aliens made sounds of genuine distress, others went completely still. High Chancellor Draveth stepped forward, gesturing towards the fleet. Each vessel you see was taken from an enemy who believed they could challenge the Alliance. Each represents a civilization that chose war and discovered their error. He walked slowly along the stage. The silver-hulled vessels belonged to the Crofty Dominion, who believed their numbers would overwhelm us. The Crimson Spires belonged to the Silhari Union, who believed their ancient technology was unmatched. The Dark Spheres belonged to the Ossic Collective, who believed their biological weapons were unstoppable. He paused, smiling. They were all mistaken. Elena breathed steadily, studying the fleet. The display was undeniably effective. Thousands of trophies, thousands of warnings. The message could not have been clearer. You cannot win. Do not try. Rohan leaned close. Should I begin recording for military intelligence? Yes, Elena murmured. Get everything. But even as she said it, something nagged at the back of her mind. A wrong note, like a word mispronounced in a sentence she'd memorized. Something about this display didn't fit together properly. Then Sovereign Keth Oron spoke again. "But these are merely our lesser victories. Now, behold the crown of our remembrance fleet, the trophies of our greatest conflict." Larger rifts opened in space. Through them came 6 ships that dwarfed everything else in the fleet. Each was enormous, easily 4 kilometers from bow to stern. Cylindrical hulls, rotating habitat rings, massive engine clusters at the rear, armor plating that still held a dull metallic sheen despite their evident age. Elena stared. Her mind went blank. Then something shifted in her memory. A museum she had visited as a child, history classes at the academy, technical diagrams in an engineering elective she'd nearly failed. Rohan grabbed her arm. His tablet had slid from his fingers and clattered to the floor. He was staring at the ships with the expression of a man who had just seen a ghost, or rather, recognized something that had no business being here. Dr. Nair was typing frantically, pulling up images on her screen, comparing them to the vessels outside the wall. Her hands were shaking. Keth Oron's voice filled the chamber. 280 years ago, the Alliance faced its most formidable adversary, a species of extraordinary warriors, relentless and cunning, who sent 6 colossal ships against us. The war endured for generations. Countless lives were lost on both sides, but the Alliance prevailed. These vessels were captured. The civilization that built them was destroyed, extinct now, their homeworld lost to the records of history. Their ships alone remain as the supreme testament to Alliance supremacy. Elena's hands were trembling. She knew those ships. She knew them. Draveth approached the human delegation, expectant, waiting for their fear to show. Elena opened her mouth to speak. What came out was a laugh. Not a polite, surprised laugh, a full, helpless, involuntary burst of laughter that she absolutely could not stop. She pressed both hands over her mouth. Her shoulders shook. Tears blurred her vision. Rohan looked at her. Then his jaw clenched. Then his shoulders started shaking too. He turned away, biting down hard on his lip. Dr. Nair covered her face with both hands, but the sounds escaping through her fingers were unmistakably laughter. High Chancellor Draveth froze. The amphitheater fell into a different kind of silence. It took Elena nearly 2 full minutes to collect herself. When she finally managed to stand, wiping tears from her face, the entire amphitheater was staring at her. The Dominion officials on the platform had hands near their weapons. The alien delegations looked frightened or baffled, or, in a few cases, cautiously intrigued. Sovereign Keth Oron's 8 eyes narrowed. "You find the Alliance's military history amusing, Commander." Elena breathed. In through the nose, out through the mouth. "Your Sovereignty, a High Chancellor, I apologize. We mean absolutely no disrespect. You pointed at the 6 enormous ships. It's just that those vessels," she gathered herself, "those are ours." The silence that followed was total. Draveth's voice dropped to something barely above a whisper. "Explain yourself." "Those ships belong to humanity," Elena said, her voice now steady, "or they did before we lost track of them 279 years ago." Rohan stepped forward, holding up his tablet. "I can prove it. May I approach?" With the Sovereign's reluctant nod, the 3 humans walked to the platform. Rohan projected a holographic image into the air, a ship design that was unmistakably identical to the 6 vessels floating outside the wall. "This," Rohan said, "is the UNSS Perseverance, first-generation colonial transport commissioned 285 years ago at the Ganymede construction yards. One of 6 sister ships, Endurance, built at the Europa orbital platform, Fortitude at Mars Station, Resolution and Tenacity, both constructed at the Saturn foundries, and Constancy, our final first-generation transport launched from the Titan yards." Dr. Nair stepped forward. "These ships were built for one purpose, to carry colonists to newly established worlds. 50,000 people per vessel, along with all the equipment, supplies, and infrastructure materials needed to build a colony from the ground up. They were never military vessels. They were civilian transports." The color had begun to drain from Draveth's violet scales. But the war, the battles, decades of conflict. When did your war begin? Elena asked. A Dominion aide passed Draveth a data tablet. The Chancellor's hands trembled slightly as he read. 280 years ago, the first encounter. The ships were reported missing 279 years ago. The dates align precisely. Rohan pulled up technical schematics. These transports were equipped with automated defense systems. The journey to colonial worlds was long, and pirates were a genuine threat. The defense protocols were sophisticated. If the ships detected hostile action, they would respond automatically. But here's the thing, Dr. Nair added. The ships were empty. Another vast silence descended over the amphitheater. Elena continued. About 282 years ago, humanity developed a significantly more efficient, faster-than-light drive. It made first-generation transports like these functionally obsolete almost immediately. Twice the speed at half the fuel consumption. We were going to decommission all 6, but someone had a better idea. She pulled up a historical document and projected it. The colonies that these transports had been intended to serve had already been established by then, using faster vessels, but they still needed supplies, agricultural equipment, manufacturing systems, medical fabricators, and construction materials. So the decision was made to load all 6 transports with cargo and send them on autopilot to their destination systems. Unmanned? Draveth asked faintly. Completely unmanned, Elena confirmed. No crew, no colonists, just cargo holds full of irrigation systems and soil processors and medical fabricators. And of course, the automated defense systems, which we couldn't deactivate. Safety regulations required them to remain active during transit. Dr. Nair looked at Draveth almost sympathetically. Your ships encountered our transports. You attempted to scan them, standard procedure, I'm sure. The defense systems interpreted active scanning at close range as hostile action and activated response protocols. When your vessels opened fire, the defense systems returned fire, and then you were in a war with ships that were simply following their programming. Protect the cargo, avoid destruction, return fire. They weren't warriors, Elena said. They were delivery vehicles with very good security systems. They were trying to bring farming equipment to our colonies. The silence in the amphitheater was absolute. It was the silence of thousands of beings processing a fundamental rearrangement of reality. Sovereign Keth Oron's voice, when it came, sounded older than before. What you are telling me is that the greatest military achievement in the Alliance history was a war against unmanned human cargo ships? Yes, Your Sovereignty, Elena said gently. That is precisely what I'm telling you. 3 days of private deliberation followed. On the 4th day, Elena was summoned to the surface of Velaris Prime itself, to the great Palace of Sovereignty, a structure so ancient that the earliest sections of it were built before humanity learned to forge iron.
In the council chamber, Sovereign Keth Oran sat on his throne with his high council arranged around him. Draveth was there. So was War Commander Sesthra, a formidable being with dark gray scales and golden eyes. Chief Analyst Vorn, whose species resembled living flame contained within a translucent shell, and 2 others Elena had not met, Economic Keeper Thilla and Justice Architect Mirren. Commander Vasquez, Keth Oran said, we have spent 3 days examining everything you revealed. We have been forced to confront truths we had avoided for centuries. His 8 eyes settled on her. The Alliance was built on the belief that fear ensures order, but our greatest symbol of power, the cornerstone of our authority, was a misunderstanding, a 3-century war against automated freight vessels. War Commander Sesthra's scales darkened. The revelation has already caused unrest. 7 member species have opened discussions about independence. 4 others are questioning the foundational treaties. How did you resolve similar crises? Keth Oran asked Elena, when humanity faced the collapse of a central authority. Elena thought carefully. We stopped trying to hold things together by force, she said. We gave our colonies genuine autonomy, made membership genuinely beneficial, trade access, technological exchange, mutual defense, cultural connection. We made people want to belong. She looked around the chamber. Your sovereignty, Chancellor, the Remembrance Fleet was built on a false foundation, but that means you have an opportunity. You can replace that foundation with something real, build an alliance that species choose to join rather than submit to. Chief Analyst Vaughn's flame-like form flickered. The economic modeling supports this approach. 38% of our current budget goes to compliance enforcement. Redirecting those resources toward development and trade would increase net prosperity across all member systems within 2 generations. Catharan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was different, no longer the voice of a sovereign issuing proclamations, but of something older and more tired. Commander Vasquez, humanity could defeat the Alliance in open conflict. Elena met his gaze steadily. Yes. And yet you came here offering friendship. Yes. Another long silence. Then, slowly, Sovereign Catharan rose from his throne. Then the Alliance has been building the wrong things, he said, and it is time to build something better. He looked at Elena. We will need your help with the transition, knowledge, expertise, partnership. Elena felt the weight of the moment. Trillions of lives across 900 star systems balanced on what she said next. We would be honored, as friends and equals. She allowed herself a small smile. Though I do have one condition. Catharan's 8 eyes focused on her. Name it. We want our cargo ships back, all 6 of them. They belong in a museum back home where future generations can learn from what happened here. Sovereign Catharan looked at her for a long moment. Then he laughed, a deep rumbling sound that resonated through the ancient crystal walls of the palace. Around him, the High Council joined in, even War Commander Sesthra, whose scales lightened to something approaching warm amusement. Agreed, Catharan said, though it wounds my pride to surrender the crown of the Remembrance Fleet, even if it turns out to be a collection of delivery trucks. You could replace them, Elena suggested, a monument to cooperation instead of conquest, something representing what the Alliance becomes next. Chief Analyst Vaughn's flame-like form flickered. The economic modeling supports this approach. 38% of our current budget goes to compliance enforcement. Redirecting those resources toward development and trade would increase net prosperity across all member systems within 2 generations. Catharan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was different, no longer the voice of a sovereign issuing proclamations, but of something older and more tired. Commander Vasquez, humanity could defeat the Alliance in open conflict. Elena met his gaze steadily. Yes. And yet you came here offering friendship. Yes. Another long silence. Then, slowly, Sovereign Catharan rose from his throne. Then the Alliance has been building the wrong things, he said, and it is time to build something better. He looked at Elena. We will need your help with the transition, knowledge, expertise, partnership. Elena felt the weight of the moment. Trillions of lives across 900 star systems balanced on what she said next. We would be honored, as friends and equals. She allowed herself a small smile. Though I do have one condition. Catharan's 8 eyes focused on her. Name it. We want our cargo ships back, all 6 of them. They belong in a museum back home where future generations can learn from what happened here. Sovereign Catharan looked at her for a long moment. Then he laughed, a deep rumbling sound that resonated through the ancient crystal walls of the palace. Around him, the High Council joined in, even War Commander Sesthra, whose scales lightened to something approaching warm amusement. Agreed, Catharan said,
Though it wounds my pride to surrender the crown of the Remembrance Fleet, even if it turns out to be a collection of delivery trucks. You could replace them, Elena suggested, a monument to cooperation instead of conquest, something representing what the Alliance becomes next. Chief Analyst Vorn's flame-like form flickered. The economic modeling supports this approach. 38% of our current budget goes to compliance enforcement. Redirecting those resources toward development and trade would increase net prosperity across all member systems within 2 generations. Catharan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was different, no longer the voice of a sovereign issuing proclamations, but of something older and more tired. Commander Vasquez, humanity could defeat through the ancient crystal walls of the palace. Around him, the High Council joined in, even War Commander Sestra, whose scales lightened to something approaching warm amusement. Agreed, Cathoran said, though it wounds my pride to surrender the crown of the Remembrance Fleet, even if it turns out to be a collection of delivery trucks. You could replace them, Elena suggested, a monument to cooperation instead of conquest, something representing what the Alliance becomes next. Chief Analyst Vorn flickered brightly. The first display could be replicas of the 6 transports, a permanent reminder of how this transformation began. With farming equipment, Elena said, and a sense of humor. Keth Oren studied her for a moment. Then he nodded. With farming equipment, he agreed, and a sense of humor. Let us begin. 6 months later, Commander Elena Vasquez stood in the newly opened Museum of Unintended Consequences on Earth, though most people had already started calling it the Cargo Ship Museum. The 6 transports, Perseverance, Endurance, Fortitude, Resolution, Tenacity, and Constancy, stood in the central hall, carefully restored, their battered hulls a testament to 3 centuries of accidental warfare. Elena stood before the Perseverance, reading the plaque mounted beside it. UNSS Perseverance, colonial transport, commissioned 285 years ago, lost in transit while delivering agricultural equipment to human colonies, spent 280 years defending its cargo against the Stellar Sovereignty Alliance's finest warships, returned home to remind us that the greatest changes sometimes come from the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the universe's best diplomats are 5-ton irrigation systems with good security protocols. She smiled. It was, she thought, a perfectly accurate summary of events. Behind her, the museum hummed with the voices of beings from dozens of worlds, humans and Valorians and species whose names she was still learning to pronounce, all gathered to see the ships that had accidentally changed the galaxy. Elena looked up at the massive cylindrical hull of the Perseverance, still bearing the scorch marks of 3 centuries of combat, and thought about absurdity, about how the most profound shifts in history so often arrive through the most ridiculous doors. 5 cargo ships, following simple programming, had occupied the most powerful empire in the known galaxy for 300 years, and then, by being recognized for what they truly were, had forced that empire to become something better. The universe, Elena decided, had a genuinely strange sense of humor. But then again, so did humanity. And sometimes that was exactly enough.